Well, if you have been here for the last few weeks, you know that right at the beginning of the year, we started this series we've titled 2018 is Your Year to Launch the Rocket Ship of Your Life. And we've been making our way through the book of Joshua. Today is our last week in the series. So open up to chapter 14. And in chapter 14, we come to a point where Joshua has been dividing up the land. So a couple of weeks ago, we read about the people crossing the Jordan, then taking the city of Jericho, then Ai. They go on to conquer 31 city-states, conquer 31 kings. And now a man, this is probably Joshua's closest friend, best friend. His name is Caleb. He comes to Joshua and he says, hey, Moses promised me some land, so give me my piece of land. Now you'll be interested to hear what kind of land he's asking for. So I'll start in verse 6. Caleb said to Joshua, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land, and I brought back him a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now move down to verse 10. So here I am today, 85 years old. This guy has a memory, like a memory of an elephant. 45 years later, he says, I'm 85, and I'm still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out, and I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle as I was then. So give me this hill country that the Lord has promised me on that day. So here we have Caleb at 85 years old saying, give me a mountain. They had taken the flatlands. He could have said, give me some of the land by the Mediterranean Sea. He doesn't. He says, give me a mountain. This text that we're looking at, this message today, is about stepping out of our places of comfort, stepping out of our comfort zones, and taking on a challenge, taking on a mountain, asking God for a challenge, asking God for a mountain. The truth is, we are creatures of comfort. We gravitate towards places that are comfortable. Veronica and I lived in a town for about 7 years in Wheaton, Illinois. I was a college pastor there. And Wheaton was Mayberry, okay? It was like the perfect Midwestern town. There was a Main Street. We just lived half a block off of Main Street. And on Main Street, you had a post office, a general store, you had a train station, and a candy shop. That was Main Street. In Wheaton, you had every Christian organization you can name had moved there. Some called it the Christian Mecca. There was a Christian publisher, of course, a Christian college. And even in Wheaton, they say it was hard to sin in Wheaton because they had banned every kind of thing, every kind of vice possible. You couldn't buy a drink in Wheaton. There were no bars. There was no alcohol. They even banned arcades. You know, those darn skaters in the arcades. So there are no arcades. Not even a Blockbuster. They wouldn't let video stores open because that was wrong. So college students in Wheaton would start talking about Wheaton as a Wheaton bubble. You know, like there's just Christians everywhere. I got to get out of the Wheaton bubble, they would say. So I shouldn't have been surprised when I announced to my college ministry that we're going back to Cuba and I needed musicians and basketball players. Well, as soon as I was done, a guy rushes up to the front. His name is Brian Hayes, and he says, Palmer, I'll go with you to Cuba if you'll promise me, on one condition, promise me one thing. I said, what's that, Brian? He said, promise me that I'll get thrown in prison while I'm in Cuba. And I was like, really? And my wife says, you're making this up. I said, no, that's what he said. And so I said, Brian, why would you want to go to prison? He said, Palmer, he said, life is too comfortable in Wheaton. As a Christian, it's too comfortable. It's too easy. He said, I've never been persecuted for my faith, so I want to get thrown in prison, and I'm a great basketball player. So, you know, I'll go with you if you'll promise. I said, Brian, A, you're a B player. And second, I will do all I can to get you thrown in prison. There's no one I'd rather see in prison than you, Brian. So we go to Cuba, and he has a life-changing week in Cuba. And not only does he get to play basketball against the Cuban Olympic team, but he and Dan on my team pray with like the drummer in our hotel lobby to accept Christ. And his whole family ends up being baptized. It's just a crazy week. And so when we came back, Brian, right when we came back, he graduated from from college. And he came in my office and he said, I have an IT degree and I have a job offer right now. And they're offering me $42,000, which was a lot in the late 90s. And he said, but Palmer, I think I'm going to turn the money down. I said, why, Brian? Why would you do that? He said, I think God wants me to be a youth pastor. And I said, you want to be a youth pastor? What you don't know is that every time we had a pickup basketball game, Brian wanted to fight somebody. Touch football, he wants to fight somebody. And I said, I thought maybe God can use this. So I said, okay, Brian, let's get your resume together and send it out. A month later, he got hired as a high school pastor, youth pastor in Ventura, California. And he's been there for 20 years. My point is, when you step out of your bubble, out of your comfort zone, you don't have to go all the way to Cuba. I don't know where your comfort zone is, but when you step out of it, then you never know what God will do next. I have this thought that I want you to take home with you. This is where we're going today. In seminary, we were told our key ideas were supposed to just be a clause, and this one got away from me, but it's all important, so we're leaving it up. The challenges God gives us, gives you, they grow you. So don't ask God for more comfort. Don't ask God for convenient. Don't ask God for manageable. Ask God for a challenge, a mountain to climb, giants to conquer. And for a challenge that is bigger than you, that stretches you and makes you uncomfortable, something that makes a difference in the world and demands your best. As you think about that, as you think about Caleb's story that we just read in the Bible, all of us have mountains looming in front of us. I don't know what yours is, but it's there. They come in all shapes and sizes. My encouragement to you today is to say, God, help me conquer this mountain. Realize that whatever mountain stands in front of you, stopping you from being the person God made you to be, it may be big, it may seem big, but it's not bigger than God. That's what I want you to see today. The problem is we are tempted to get comfortable. That's the temptation for all of us. So we're going to start there next. And I want to read to you what Caleb says about the other Israelites. So if we back up in the story, he mentioned something that happened 45 years earlier. Moses had sent 12 spies into the land. And Caleb says 10 of them didn't trust God for anything big. So he says this is verse 8. My fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. However, I followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So he's reaching back and he's saying, we had all of these people who were too afraid of the giants in the land. And so, do you know what happened? So I have on the screen, comfort will kill you. And that's what literally happened. Those 10 who didn't believe that Israel could take the land, over the next 40 years, they all died. Comfort can literally kill you. I'm talking about it can also kill and shrink your soul. But there's a world-renowned psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman. And one of the studies he's done is on people of faith. That's like you, in communities of faith. That's people like us that go to church. And in his categories, he had on one extreme end, people who were most optimistic, and then at the other end of the spectrum, people who were most pessimistic. And here's what he found after studying dozens and dozens of people of faith over a couple of dozen years. And he found this, that people who were the most optimistic and full of faith, that at 85 years old, 90% of them were still alive. Can you believe it? 90% were still alive. But then those who were most pessimistic in that camp, at age 85, 66% of them were dead. Okay, that's what happened. My point is that living faith-filled and optimistic, following God in that, it will actually maybe extend your life. They say that we are creatures of comfort naturally. I think it's true because most of us, we like to sit, don't we? Now, the thing is, we're being told that sitting is a new Marlboro, right? It's a new cigarette. It will kill you. And so, but then we sit when we commute to work, we sit at our desk, we sit on couches. I have a friend now, he stands at his desk. His back's going out on him, but he stands at his desk all day long. And he's going to live longer. But if you think about the things that we buy, when we buy a car, we look for a car with the softest ride, most comfortable ride. We buy shoes with the most comfortable sole. We even pick out bathroom tissue with the softest feel. And of course, if you're going to buy a mattress, you need like a Comfort King or a Comfort Rest, and you can buy those at stores called Pure Comfort. That's what we want. Sociologists say in our personal lives, we have a space like that. We have a space that is comfortable. And so we've termed it your comfort zone. Maybe you've never defined it or described it, but it's there. It's your everyday routine. You like it because it's familiar. We like our comfort zones because it feels safe. It's predictable. You know what the routine is. But at the same time, the best things in life don't happen inside of our comfort zone. I have this JPEG on the screen that I want to show to you, this graph. And it's this, that your comfort zone is the red dot, but then the blue dot, that's where the most awesome things happen. That's, I think it's true. And it's true. Because in your comfort zone, you rarely do something new. You rarely do something extraordinary. But it's when you step outside of it that you're challenged. There's a rule of thumb in screenwriting, if you ever want to be a screenwriter, is that you must, if you're writing a screenplay, you must force the character to do something new. Because characters, if you're writing a novel or a movie script, they don't naturally do extraordinary things. Most people, most of you here, don't spend your day going around to banks looking for robbers that you can tackle. Most of us don't get on an airplane going, oh, I hope I can find a hijacker today. It doesn't. But if you're writing a movie script, you force the character to do something heroic, to do something brand new that will stretch them and get them out of their comfort zone. The thing is, when we're in our comfort zone, life can turn very flat because we get planted in one place. And then God doesn't do the best things. So my invitation today is to ask God for a challenge and to be willing to do the most uncomfortable things. So let's go back to our text. We read this about Caleb. I'm going to pick up in verse 10. So here I am today, 85 years old. I'm still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. So give me this hill country that the Lord promised me on that day. You yourself heard that the Anakites, these are the giants, were there. And their cities are large and fortified, but the Lord helping me, I will drive them out. Okay, so this guy is 85 years old. He sounds like Clint Eastwood on Red Bull. This is what he sounds like. And he's ready to take on Anak in Hebrew, it means giant. So he says, I'm going to take the mountain with the giants. Who says that? Who says, give me a challenge and a problem? But Caleb does. You would think he would be saying, hey, can you give me a nice place in the desert like the springs in Palm Springs and with a pickleball court, and then I'll be fine. But he doesn't. He asks for something uncomfortable. He asks for a challenge. Great leaders, and I think great athletes know that if we are going to grow, if you're going to do something extraordinary, that you have to step out of your comfort zone. You have to do something that you naturally are not comfortable doing. I'll use an example from the Olympics this week. Jennifer asked you, what was your favorite event? Mine was watching the half pipe because I think of myself as a half piper. I went down a half pipe once, just straight down the middle. The kids at the bottom were saying, hey, dude, this is Big Bear. Hey, dude, you just skied straight through the middle of our half pipe. And I said, wasn't that awesome? I didn't fall, I didn't. Anyway, so me and Shaun White in the same camp. So as I talk about, so my favorite was watching Shaun White. But if you are watching, it comes down to he's in second place. He's in line for the silver medal. And the announcers, they know that if he's going to get the gold, they said he has to do back-to-back 1440s. Now, maybe you don't know what a 1440 is. We have a diagram here to help you understand. There's Shaun White in the middle of a 1440. But a 1440 is, they call it a triple cork. So here, we have a drawing for you. This will help a lot. It's you get upside down, and then it's you're off-axis spinning 3 times sideways and upside down. This helps everybody, I'm sure. Anyway, so that's a triple cork 1440. But Shaun White, and the announcers said this, they said, he has to do it if he's going to take home the gold because the other kid has already done it. So he's got to do it better than him. But the last time he tried back-to-back 1440s was 2 months ago in New Zealand, and he landed on his face. It knocked him out cold. He needed 13 stitches that are still healing in his head. He bruised his lungs, but the only way he was going to get the gold medal was to do back-to-back 1440s. Well, if I'm Shaun White, you know what I say? I go, hey, just give me the silver. You know, it's good. I'm good with that. You know, I'm just happy to be here. But he goes out there and he busts the first 1440. Then he busts the second 1440 and he lands it and he gets the gold. That's my point. I think all of us have those opportunities. Great leaders know that you have to get out. That was outside of his comfort zone, if there is one. But we all, I think we start to thrive when we step out of our places of comfort and do that thing that we never thought we could do. And then we grow, then we improve. Maybe you've pushed yourself to do something, and you know that when you pushed yourself, you got better at it. The problem is there's a small part of our brain that is called the amygdala. I don't know much about it, but it's Greek for almond. It's the size of an almond. It looks like an almond. But the amygdala remembers every bad thing that ever happened to you. So most people, by the time you're 85 years old, you don't want to do anything new because you know it'll kill you. When you're young, like I have 4 sons, and when they were young, they would like bounce on the couch and try to do a flip onto the floor, and a lot of times they'd hit their head on the corner of the coffee table, just stab it there, and they go, oh, you know, bad luck. And they get back and they try it again. But when you're 42, you don't do that anymore because you know it's not going to go well. And you have this world of bad experiences. And our mind has this way of vividly remembering bad things and not remembering the best as well as the bad. And so we don't try those things. At 44, you don't try a 1440. But at 22, you will. And you'll do parkour and everything else. But my point is, until you start doing the things that are uncomfortable, you won't grow. You won't get better at it. I think it's in the discomfort, if that makes sense. It's in the challenge of the discomfort that we grow and we improve, and God uses our lives in new and better ways. Maybe you've seen that in your life, but maybe you have started to shrink away from those opportunities. I've seen that happen a number of times for me. One that stands out, I was talking to a couple of our junior high ministry interns this week, and they didn't know I had been a junior high intern. I was a junior high director, and I was telling them about what it was like. And the first time I was asked to speak to adults, bona fide adults, that's like you know, real grown adults. Because I had been speaking to junior hires, but then our singles ministry pastor said, would you speak to my group? It's only like 30 singles, but I was scared spitless. And even though I knew how to speak to junior hires, but that was like speaking to cats, all right? They're just all over the place. They don't know what you're saying. They really don't care what you're saying. But now I had to speak to adults. And so for 2 weeks as I was prepared, I was like, man, I don't want to do this. I told them I would do it. I have to show up. So that night, as I'm driving to their meeting, I started to pray. And I'm praying just like the rest of you would pray. And I'm saying, God, help me tonight. Could I please have a car accident? You know, not a major, I really did pray this. I'm not making this up. I said, God, not a major accident. You know, I just have liability and not collision. And I really like my VW Rapid. So, but God, I need to have an accident. And there's no airbag, God, so it can't be too violent. But I don't want to speak. And I honestly, literally would have rather crashed the car than speak that night. But that night I realized after I was done, it didn't kill me. And then you realize that your competency, it increases just a little bit. And then you get a little more confident. And then you do a little bit better the next time. And it's like that for you. Whatever mountain God puts in front of you, go straight at it. Take on that challenge. Don't shrink away from it. If we stay in our comfort zones, you will not grow. Your soul will not be stretched. I love how Josh Havens, every time we're meeting with our team or we're trying to plan something creative at the Grove, we'll almost always hit a sticking point where too many people are saying, it's a bad idea, it's not going to work, we're all going to die. And so then Josh says, we have to leave the room. We have to get out of this room. He says that's a rule of songwriting, that when you get stuck, you have to leave the space where you are and you go outside and you sit in the trees or you go to a coffee shop you've never been to before. And when you step out, all of a sudden, you start to think new thoughts. So here's my next challenge. ask God for a mountain with giants. And that's what Caleb does here. Verse 11, he says, now give me this hill country with the Anakites, the sons of Anak, and the Lord helping me, I will drive them out. Who in their right mind asks for a problem and a challenge? But great leaders know that a challenge will grow you. Great leaders don't ask for ease. Great leaders don't ask for manageable. They ask for a challenge. They ask for something that God puts in front of them that will help them make a difference in this world. And the only way they can do it is if God shows up and if God is a part of it. So say, God, give me a mountain. You will not grow. You cannot grow until you start to take those things on. What if all of us started to see every challenge in front of us as an invitation from God to grow? Sometimes we resist those challenges, but what if they're just opportunities for you to grow? Because you know that physically, when you work out, your body gets stronger when you stretch your body. If you're a runner, you know the further you run, the stronger you get as a runner. You know that as you study, your mind gets more competent and stronger. It's the same with our soul. So ask God for a challenge. And maybe today you have a challenge in front of you that you never asked for. You don't even want it. In fact, you've been saying, God, take this challenge away from me. You think it's a curse. Maybe this challenge is a blessing. You say, I never wanted this trouble. I never wanted to deal with this, but maybe it's a blessing because God's going to grow you through it. You want it to pass quickly, but instead see it as an opportunity to grow. When you have a mountain like Caleb's in front of you, how do you know it's a right mountain? I think there's a couple of indicators. One, this mountain will catch you at your best. It will require your strengths and your passions. Write those things down if you write things down. If you know which way to head next, the thing that's in front of you, if it will use your strengths and your passions, then go straight at it. That's where God wants you next. And then, not only that, how will you know this is the right mountain? It will use your strengths and your passions. But then how do you take a mountain? I think you can't kind of just walk up a mountain. I don't think if you're 85 years old and there's giants on the mountain, I don't think you can kind of take the mountain or sort of take the mountain. I think you have to charge up the mountain, don't you? And that's why Caleb, he says here in verse 8, he says, I have followed God wholeheartedly. It's such a great lie. So you know that when he's going at the mountain, he's going to charge wholeheartedly at it. It's kind of like Camelback, I think. I had a good friend here at the Grove. His name is John Lott. He was the strength and conditioning coach for the Cardinals. Now he's with the Chargers. But every year they would have rookie camp. And one year when all the rookies came into town, he called me, he said, hey, I'm taking the rookies up Camelback. Do you want to go? And I was like, sure, John. I thought I was like quasi-athletic. I'd never been up Camelback, no problem at all. So I said, sure, I'll be there. So I show up with all of his rookies. And I'm picturing like, we're just going to take a hike up Camelback, stop and have an apple and a diet soda on the way up. That's what I was picturing. So, but when we get to the parking lot, everyone huddles together, and then John Lott says, booyah, and go. And I didn't know what happened, but they're all sprinting. What I didn't realize up until this point was we had about 40 guys trying to make the roster of an NFL team with the most fit human beings in the entire universe. So they're running like their lives depends on it. I was like, well, I can't be left behind, so I take off with them. And I'm right up in front, right with the wide receivers and the safeties and the D-backs. I'm like, this is okay. That lasted for about 50 yards, all right? Then I thought, I need to pace myself. So now I'm with the quarterback. So it's me and like 3 or 4 quarterbacks. I'm like, these guys are kind of athletic, so I'm just going to stay. That didn't last long. Pretty soon I'm with a linebackers are athletic, but very thick, so I stayed with them. By the time I got to the top, it's me and the O-lineman, just me and the O-lineman, but we made it together. But no one trying to make an NFL team is going to kind of go up the mountain. You're not going to leisurely walk up the mountain. You're going to bust it. You're going to sprint. If God puts a mountain in front of you, charge at it. Take it on. I was asking my son last night, the one that was home, I said, hey, what's the analogy? Like when a bear charges you, aren't you supposed to punch it in the nose? He said, no, Dad, that's a shark. A shark. You're supposed to punch a shark. He said, a bear is supposed to lay on the ground. So here's what I want to say. It's not a bear. But whatever mountain is in front of you, go straight at it. You know, if you punch it in the, I'm not saying punch any person like your boss or anybody, your kids. And that's not what I'm saying. But we get intimidated by the mountains in front of us, and they shut us down, and we stop living the life that God has for us. And I just want to say that problem, that challenge in front of you is not a curse. It's probably a blessing, and God is using it to grow you. And maybe today where you need to start is to write down the names of these mountains, or the one that you need to charge at and conquer and take. Here's a final thought. And it's this. It's simple. Stay restless. I love how at 85 years old, Caleb is still restless. And I have in your handout that your life is way too precious for you to waste it. And so stay restless. And I'll just read this line one more time. Caleb says, here I am today, 85 years old. I'm still as strong as the day Moses sent me out. Now give me the hill country. He says, you have heard that the Anakites, the giants are there, but their cities are large and fortified. But I, God helping me, I will drive them out. You know what? Caleb was going to keep climbing mountains until the day he died. You know where I know Caleb did not die? Was in a recliner. That's just my guess. It wasn't in a recliner. When I think about Caleb and I think about his story, you know, you read this and you go, man, this guy is extraordinary. And I think he's like Magellan. I was helping one of my sons with a project a few years ago, and he was supposed to write about Magellan. I knew that Magellan was the first person to circle the globe on a ship, but I didn't know how he died. And as we're reading about his life, we read that he was in the Philippines finding new space for Portugal. And this is like early 1520s. And the indigenous Filipinos got angry that he was there trying to take their land. So they come after him, chasing him and his other men, the other sailors, with spears and with machetes. And so he's literally running down the beach, trying to make it to a ship to get back to Portugal. And they catch him. And it's a bad story. He dies there. But I thought this, it's not a great story, but he dies. Anyway, he dies on the beach from the spears and machetes. But here's the good news. Yeah, I think if you're a world-renowned explorer, you don't want to end up laying on a beach towel, you know, next to the swimming pool and die. You want to die on a beach with people chasing you with spears if you're a world-renowned explorer. And just thinking about Magellan and Caleb, some years ago, I was on a plane, literally flying across the Atlantic. And I was working on writing something that I titled 90 Days to Live. And so I made a list of places I did not want to die. So I put it at the top of the list, was in a recliner. That was the first place. Second place I didn't want to die was under a Coke machine. And you go, why'd you write that? Because I read that every year, several people die trying to steal a Coke and the machine dies on them. It's just kind of shameful, you know, just kind of a bad way to go. I also write getting hit by a bus in London because we had just been in London. And on the streets, every time you come to an intersection, they paint on the sidewalk, look right, and with an arrow, big light, look right. Because what was happening is Americans like us, zonies, were coming to London and we would look left. Well, the traffic there is not coming from left. And so Americans would step out and boom, a big double-decker bus hits you from here. I don't want to be, you want to go to my funeral and they say, he should have looked right. If he looked right, he's not here. This is not happening. So I put that in. What else did I put? I didn't want to die. I put in an RV in Quartzsite. You know, that was the last on the list. I'm going to go down. It's not going to be in Quartzsite. But I think all of us, I say that because every day you live on this earth is precious. Your life is precious. God's given you one life, and it's a very important life to live. And so whatever mountain God puts in front of you, take it. Living your life filled with this kind of purpose is not just a good idea. It's why you were made. It's why God put you here. You have this one and most valuable life. I think sometimes we seek comfort instead of challenge. And I want to invite us as people of the Grove to keep living differently. I want to close by reading something that one of my favorite authors, he's a theologian at Northwestern, Scott McKnight wrote in his book, One Life. He writes, "You've got one life. Do what you're called to do. Do all that you're called to do. Don't settle for anything less. And give your whole life to what God made you to do, because you've got one life to live."